Thank you, Ravi. Just a little bit information about the session that we conducted yesterday. ECMOD coordinated a session on water-related disasters and climate change in cooperation with Asia Pacific Water Forum, of course, UN ESCAP, Global Water Partnership, ICHARM, and World Youth Network. The case studies that were prepared for our sessions were contributed by scientists at ARGAM, India, CMES, which is a joint center of ICRAF, and the Chinese Academy of Sciences, UN ESCAP, and ECMOD. And all the case studies have been uploaded on the program website, so it can be downloaded. It is an outcome of several months of research that these scientists did at the various institutions in our region. First of all, what we tried to do in the session yesterday was focus on the whole question of water-related disasters and what are the issues behind water-related disasters in the region. As we all know, our region faces more water-related disasters than any other region in the world. And then we try to think that in the context of climate change, and how climate change is going to have an effect in our region in terms of increase in the frequency and intensity of extreme weather events in our region. And then from that point on, what we tried to do in the session was to see if we can develop some adaptation measures that could be aimed at building resilience at the community level. So that was the way we looked at it. We're looking at water-related disasters in the context of climate change, and our purpose was to develop adaptation measures that will help us build resilience at the community level. Now, in terms of the focus of discussions, we try to keep it within the context of the most recent international conference on disaster risk reduction that was held in Sendai, Japan. In that conference, there were 4 priorities that were listed as an outcome. And one of the 4 priorities was the need to have a better risk governance. The whole focus of our session was on this topic of risk governance. How can we develop more effective risk governance in our region? So on that topic, we had a keynote speech, and we had a special presentation by Mr. Ravi Narayanan, also our chair of the Governing Council. We have come up with 5 key messages. These key messages we have drawn from the case studies that were prepared. On the basis of that research, then we try to expand it a little bit, because case studies, of course, are very narrowly focused on specific situations. We try to expand. What are the implications of these case studies now? When you think at a much broader level for the Asia-Pacific region. So I'll go each one of those quickly. Let's start at key message 1. The key message 1 essentially has to do with the need to develop end-to-end information systems when we are talking about building resilience to floods. So what that essentially means, by the time you gather the data, the hydromet data, to the time the message goes to the household at the community level, the last mile, how do you develop that end-to-end system? The fundamental message that came out in our session was that so far we've been focusing a lot on the technology, the need to expand the number of hydromet stations, the need to go for emerging ICT technologies. But unless we do something about the institutions at each level, the interface between the government and community level institutions, it will be difficult to meet this objective of getting to the last mile. So the message therefore was there's a need to develop institutions, more supportive interfaces, national local institutions interfaces, and to build capacity at the local level. So basically then we identify 5 major actions to be taken to deliver that key messages. The second key message that we came up with was the need to develop an index-based weather insurance. As we all know, agricultural insurance has been a very difficult task to build resilience in our regions. They have been mostly in the form of crop insurance. And the reason why it has happened, it is very difficult to avoid false claims when you have crop insurance. And the administrative costs are very high. As a result, the ratio of the value of the claims plus the administrative costs of crop insurance to the premium actually paid by the farmer, we were told in the session yesterday, was mostly in the range from 3 to 5 in our region. So then the question is, how is insurance industry sustainable if the value of claims plus administrative cost is 5 times the premium paid by the farmers? And the reason it has been sustainable is because of government subsidy. The government has been subsidizing either the value of the claims or the premium that would otherwise have been paid by the farmers. So what this group from UN ISCAP did at the session is they came up with ways to promote index-based weather insurance. So what this does is it uses index based on various parameters like rainfall, wind speed, temperature, and on the basis of that, the judgment is made. How much is to be paid and when. So as a result, this lowers the number of false claims that would otherwise have taken place. So that was the basis of discussion there. The other thing that came up during discussion was it's very important to have some form of risk assessment that will help for the insurer to insure people, because insurer must have sufficient information about the nature of risk being insured. And that often isn't true in our region. So there's a very important role for risk assessment to make sure that this program works. And the next message has to do with risk assessment. The next message says that evidence-based risk assessment is essential to promote water-related disaster risk management. Now, during their presentation, our colleagues from ICHARM, what they said is the risk assessment has to be based on evidence, on the data that have been collected and archived on hazard and the damage. And that helps to develop indicators that make risk assessment more evidence-based. So that shows a need to develop a system of collecting and using historical data and to use it for the purpose of risk assessment. And this, again, as you see, already it helps in the case of insurance meshes as well. So these were the 4 actions suggested by ICHARM to make evidence-based risk assessment effective. The 4th key message has to do with mountain water security. That was one of the 4 topics we were supposed to discuss. Besides climate change, water-related hazards, and the resilience building, we're also supposed to discuss mountain water security at our session. And the message here is that there's a need to understand better the hydrogeology of mountain springs. And it was a very fundamental idea that came out of the scientists from Argam Foundation in India. What he was saying was, traditionally, when we think about water in the mountains, you think about the catchment. You think about having natural vegetation in the catchment, which is known as the sanctuary approach. What he's saying is there's a need to think about the recharge area. You have to know where the recharge area is by using science, by using hydrogeology. You have to know where the aquifers are, and that's the way to manage spring. So this is a drastic change from watershed management approach to springshed management approach. And finally, As I said, what risk governance was the main focus, and the key message was there's a need for a mechanism for communication between policymakers and local communities, and to develop supportive interface between government's policies and programs and the initiatives adopted by communities at a local level. And to sum it up, the fundamental thing that came up in our session was that we always talk a lot about the role of national governments in policies. We talk the role of the communities, but don't forget about the role of private sector. Don't forget of the role of knowledge institutions. Don't forget about the role of NGOs. So it has to be some kind of what you might call polycentric risk governance. Thank you.